The dangerous precedent of Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter. President Biden has issued pardons to just 26 people during his term and granted the commutation of 132 prison sentences. Though he has been criticized for his reluctance to extend clemency, his choice mostly represented the best form of it, wiping away the criminal stains of everyday people who had been unjustly convicted, or reducing prison time for those whose sentences were excessive. And his modest record spoke to Mr. Biden's attempt to protect an admirable restraint in using his easily abused power to overrule the judgment of the justice system. Then on Sunday, in direct violation of his own pledges not to do so, Biden pardoned his own son Hunter, though he claimed the decision was made out of fatherly love. His explanation also attacked the investigation of his son and implicitly his own Justice Department. This was a significant misstep that could leave lasting damage. It will not only tarnish Biden's own record as a defender of democratic norms, it will also be greedily embraced as justification for Donald Trump's further abuses of pardon power and broader attacks on the integrity of the justice system. At the most base level, it reinforces the sense that Trump's systematic abuse of the pardon system in his first term was not an aberration, that presidents of every party exploit their constitutional privilege to benefit their relatives and cronies, that justice is only for those with the right connections. It's easy to imagine the, quote, "they did it too," end quote, defense being offered should Trump pardon the perpetrators of any type of actions. For example, January 6th on the Capitol, as he suggested he will. Hunter Biden's crimes are not nearly equivalent to the destruction caused by rioters, but his father's action muddies the defenses against future abuses, the article says. As Hunter Biden's firearms and tax cases wound through the courts, the president and his aides repeatedly pledged he would not intervene and would not issue a pardon, even after Hunter Biden pleaded guilty to 9 federal tax charges in September. This was consistent with his broader pledge, central to his campaign and electoral mandate, to protect the independence and integrity of the justice system. On the day after January 6 riot 2021, as he introduced Merrick Garland as a choice for Attorney General, Biden condemned Trump's interference in the judiciary and said the nation's democratic institutions were the nation's guardrails. "There's no president who is a king, no Congress that's the House of Lords," Biden said that day. "A judiciary does not serve the will of the president or exist to protect him or her. We have 3 co-equal branches of government. Government co-equal, our president is not above the law. Justice serves the people, it does not protect the powerful. Justice is blind," he said. Presidents have the unlimited right to issue pardons for crimes that could be charged by federal prosecutors, but when they use that power on behalf of their loved ones or their political allies or their financial supporters, they erode confidence in ideals, that justice is blind, that all are equal before the law. In the modern era, the most notorious, though much contested example was Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon in 1974. Presidents of both parties earned scores for using the power for seemingly self-serving ends. In 1992, George H.W. Bush pardoned Caspar Weinberger, the former defense secretary, along with 5 others involved in the Iran-Contra scandal during the Reagan administration. And in 2001, during his last week in office, Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich, the fugitive financier whose ex-wife had donated heavily to the Clintons and the Democratic National Committee, along with his half-brother Roger Clinton, who pleaded guilty to cocaine distribution. But abuse of pardon authority escalating significantly during Trump's first term in the White House, he pardoned his advisors Steve Bannon, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, and Roger Stone. He pardoned Charles Kushner, the father of his son-in-law Jared Kushner. He pardoned 3 service members accused of convicting war crimes, over the objection of his own leaders in the Pentagon after campaigns by his allies in conservative media. Trump has obviously never demonstrated any interest in the principles that presidents should not use the levers of power, including the Justice Department, to punish enemies and reward friends, supporters, and family members. He is already vowing to pardon a large portion of the more than 1,500 people who've been federally charged with crimes in relation to the January 6th riot. Biden has been consistent enough in his defense of judicial independence to understand the implications of this abuse. This week, in justifying his decision, he accused his own Justice Department of selectively unfairly prosecuting his son, to use a word that Democrats have often used in warning of the dangers of overlooking Mr. Trump's defiance of norms and values of our democracy. Biden has now normalized the abnormal. In doing so, he's made further abuses more likely. It further erodes American faith that the justice system is fair and equal for all, said Senator Michael Bennet, Democrat of Colorado. There's little doubt Biden took pains to note that the prosecution of Hunter Biden occurred in an environment of significant political pressure from the president's enemies. The nonviolent firearms charge on which Hunter Biden was convicted are rarely prosecuted on their own, especially against first-time offenders, and it's clear that many of Trump's choice for top executive positions, particularly his pick for FBI Director Kash Patel, are determined to carry out Trump's orders to pursue his critics and perceive enemies through the legal system. But that does not change the fact that Hunter Biden, whose long history of exploiting his family's name and influence consistently cross all lines of propriety and indeed break the law, he pleaded guilty to 9 federal tax charges after being convicted by a jury of his peers of the firearms-related crimes. It's not sufficient justification for such a self-interested use of presidential pardon, particularly one as sweeping as this one, which exonerates Hunter Biden for any crime he may have possibly committed over the past 10 years. It's probably the broadest pardon since the one Nixon received. Biden instead should be using his clemency powers to address real inequities in the legal system, and there are a vast number of them. He did issue mass pardons for thousands of people convicted of marijuana possession under federal law, although no one was in prison for that crime alone at the time of the pardon, and for veterans earlier convicted of engaging in gay sex, but there are more than 8,000 petitions for clemency pending with the Justice Department, and the White House should examine as many cases as possible and pardon those deserving of clemency than the president's own son. This is from New York Times on DNYUZ. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.